In high school, I decided I wanted to be a landscape architect. So I did things like took Latin so that I could know the botanical names and so forth. But I decided later, my dad was a building contractor, and I worked on summer jobs with him, and I finally decided maybe I'd switch my thinking and become an architect. So that's what I did. I lived in Idaho Falls at the time, and so it was a good decision. I started school at University of Utah in 1950. It was a good decision because that's where I met my wife.
That was a great decision.
Frank Lloyd Wright was coming to Salt Lake to be interviewed for a project at Westminster College. So they invited him to speak to the students. So we knew he was coming, and we put up the very finest work that we could come up with in our little exhibition hall. The school was in a wood building from was a barracks building. But anyway, we put the best work we could think of up for him to look at. So anyway, so he was speaking to us, and all of a sudden he stopped right in the middle of his talk. And he just went around and looked at all of the exhibit. He came back and said, "Gentlemen, you're wasting your time." That made the professors very happy. Mayor Glade took Frank Lloyd Wright on a little trip around Salt Lake City. And in the course of it, they went to Temple Square. And he wanted to go in the temple, and he told him you can't go in there. And he had a little hard time understanding that. But he went in the tabernacle. He was just taken with that building. And when he left that building, he went up in the roof structure. When he left the building, he said, "This is one of the finest pieces of architecture in this country and perhaps the world." The Korean War was on. I went immediately into the Army. I didn't do any architecture during that period. I did go into to Seattle and talk with a few architectural firms, and I had some offers, but my wife said, "I can't take this rain." I could get a higher starting salary in architecture in Idaho Falls than I could get in Salt Lake, but I always intended to come to Salt Lake. So I worked in Idaho Falls for a few years, and then I came to Salt Lake. When I came to Salt Lake, I came up and interviewed with a few firms, and I had 3 offers. And anyway, one of them was from Ashton Evans and Brazier, and I thought, I don't want to start an architectural practice of my own. That's not my goal. I'd rather be in a firm. And so Ray Ashton had retired. Ray Evans was very ill. Bud Brasier was still a young man, so I thought, that might be and Fred Montmorency and Dave Hayes were associates there. So I decided to go to work for them. I guess I was there about 6 years and became an associate. Obviously, the method of construction has changed through the years. When I was doing schools, it was all masonry. That's what everybody wanted. And there are not many. Laying up one brick at a time is not very practical now. So, but most of it was, and I did. There's a lot of difference between doing an elementary school and a junior high school or a high school. Elementary schools, that's why you'll see elementary schools that are 50, 60 years old that are still being used, because the building still works. But in secondary school, that's not true. The buildings just don't work anymore because the technology has changed so much. I think the schools today are much more handsome than they were when I was designing. In fact, I remember I attended a lot of school board meetings in my day, and I remember this district where a new building had just opened up, and one of the taxpayers was in complaining about the cost of that building. And so they showed him, they knew he was coming, they showed him that it was comparable to what was other buildings of that type. And he said, well, it looks too good and we don't want that anymore. When you have three partners, you know, we were pretty compatible, but you know, we're human. And I had some problems with some clients. One of the school districts that we worked with had an educator that was impossible to work with. He wanted the contractors to do things that weren't in the contract.
How did you resolve that?
Pardon?
How did you resolve that?
Well, give a little, take a little. Any advice I'd give to an architect is to make integrity important in your life and to treat everybody with that in mind, and especially in today where there seems to be a lack of it. For example, we used to do our major projects without a contract, somebody that we'd worked with before, but major contract without a contract. And anyway, one day our insurance provider says, you can't do that anymore, you got to have a contract. So I go in to see one of our major clients on a new building we're doing, a multi-million-dollar building, and I bring out the contract, and he said, did you prepare this contract? And I said, yes. He just signed it. Now, that means a lot to me. That means a lot to me.